Hello, lovely people. Jana here. Welcome back to episode 4 of our series, Have We Met Before? Let's dive in. As Taehyung Nathaniel made his way through the office, his heart racing with anticipation, he paused outside Jungkook's cabin. He smoothed his hair and adjusted his jacket, a confident smirk spreading across his face. With a playful wiggle of his eyebrows, he pushed the door open, catching the stunned figure inside off guard. "Surprise, Tanny's here," he announced, leaning casually against the doorframe. Jungkook's eyes widened in shock, his mind scrambling to process the sudden appearance of his Australian crush. "Tanny, what are you doing here?" he stammered, rushing to close the door behind Taehyung. Without missing a beat, Taehyung pulled out his phone and played Messy by Lola, our recent hit song. The room filled with the infectious beat, and before Jungkook could react, Taehyung seized his hand and spun him into a dance. "Are you serious? Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" Jungkook gasped, attempting to wriggle free from Taehyung's grip. He darted to the door, locking it to ensure their privacy. Taehyung's only response was a mischievous smile as he twirled Jungkook around the room. Jungkook's mind raced with questions. "What if my appa had seen you?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of anxiety and excitement. But Taehyung didn't seem to hear. He flicked Jungkook's chin playfully and continued to dance, his laughter filling the air. Slowly, Jungkook's resistance melted away, and he found himself laughing and dancing along with Taehyung, the tension in his shoulders dissipating. When the music faded, Taehyung turned off the speaker and collapsed into a chair, breathing heavily but with a satisfied grin. He turned his gaze to Jungkook, whose giggles slowly died away under the weight of Taehyung's intense stare. Jungkook fidgeted with his hands, feeling the heat rise to his cheeks. Taehyung's eyes never left Jungkook as he spoke softly, his voice laced with a playful undertone. "Now, what were you saying?" Jungkook's heart raced, and he struggled to find his voice. "And nothing," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He quickly poured a glass of water for Taehyung, his hands trembling slightly. He slid the glass over to Taehyung, their fingers brushing briefly. Jungkook's pupils dilated, and his breath caught in his throat as he felt a sudden rush of heat spread through his body. Taehyung accepted the glass with a knowing smile, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "You know, you look even more adorable when you're flustered," he teased, taking a slow sip of water. Jungkook's breath hitched, his pulse quickening at Taehyung's words. "Tanny, what are you doing to me?" he murmured, unable to tear his eyes away from Taehyung's captivating gaze. Taehyung leaned forward, his smile morphing into a sly smirk. "Just enjoying the view, my love. It's not every day I get to see you this up close and personal." Jungkook's cheeks flushed with warmth, and he couldn't help but smile back, his nervous tension easing under Taehyung's captivating gaze. He took a step closer, feeling the magnetic pull between them. "You really know how to make an entrance," he admitted, his voice softening. Taehyung countered. "Only for you," he whispered, his eyes brushing lightly over Jungkook's lower lip. "You're worth every mile, every surprise." Jungkook's heart swelled with emotions. He settled into his seat across from Taehyung. He couldn't help but sneak glances at the man who was taking in the cabin's atmosphere. Suddenly, Taehyung's eyes flickered to Jungkook, catching him in the act. A knowing smile spread across Taehyung's face and Jungkook gulped, feeling a bit embarrassed. "So, what's the plan now?" Jungkook asked, trying to regain his composure. "It's Friday night, let's escape and indulge in some well-deserved fun," Taehyung declared. "Aren't you tired? You traveled 10 long hours." Jungkook trailed off, concerned. Taehyung's smile widened, his gaze locking onto Jungkook's with smoldering intensity. "After seeing the only thing I was craving, I'm fully recharged," he said, his voice dripping with charm. Jungkook felt his cheeks heat up and quickly looked away, hiding his blush. "I've got a bit of work," It'll take another hour to wrap up, he explained. Fine, I'll wait then. While admiring the view, Taehyung replied, his tone teasing. Please, pretend I'm not here. Taehyung got up from his seat, while Jungkook pulled his laptop closer, thinking to himself, underscore if it's even possible to ignore this man's captivating presence. Taehyung wandered over to the bookshelf, thumbing through the titles. He picked one up, flipping through the pages. Come on, Rue, not a single English book, he exclaimed, holding up a copy of Kim Ji-young, born 1982, by Cho Namju. Jungkook glanced at the book and smiled. It's a famous novel, he replied. And you think I can read? Jungkook's smile was dry. Per you. Taehyung left the book on the table. He walked over to the couch, stretching out comfortably. Jungkook looked up from his laptop, his eyes locking onto Taehyung's face, a smile playing on his lips. I might doze off, he warned. Feel free to sleep, I'll keep watch over you, Jungkook said with a sly smile, his eyes sparkling with mischief. He then picked up a pillow from behind him and tossed it at Taehyung. Be comfortable. Taehyung giggled, catching the pillow and hugging it tight. Come and join me then. Jungkook's response was immediate. Shut up. A few minutes later, Jungkook noticed Taehyung's breathing slow, his chest rising and falling rhythmically like the calming waves of an ocean. A soft smile spread across Jungkook's face as he marveled at the serene sight before him. Asterisk, what are you, Taehyung Nathaniel? Asterisk, he thought, his heart swelling with a mix of admiration and affection. How do you make me feel so complete, so incredibly alive? The sight of Taehyung sleeping so serenely brought warmth to Jungkook's heart. He reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from Taehyung's forehead. You feel mine, underscore Jungkook thought, his eyes filled with affection. Underscore like a part of me I never knew was missing. Asterisk, Jungkook's voice was barely above a whisper. So divine. Taehyung's eyes flickered open, his gaze locking onto Jungkook's face. A slow, lazy smile spread across his lips. Divine, you say? Well, if you think so, I'm ready to be yours, body and soul. Jungkook's heart raced, and he suddenly stood up, flustered. Let's go, he blurted out, his cheeks tinged with pink. Taehyung chuckled softly as he sat up and adjusted his clothes. Whatever you say, my Rue. When they walked out of the office, Jungkook's employees greeted him with warm smiles, their eyes drawn to the captivating stranger by his side. Taehyung's gaze met theirs, his eyes sparkling with warmth and amusement. Wow, you guys are looking sharp today, Taehyung exclaimed, his voice laced with playful flirtation. I'm starting to think Jungkook's the only one who dresses down around here. The employees chuckled, their faces lighting up with delight. Jungkook's eyes narrowed slightly as Taehyung effortlessly charmed his team, laughing and joking with them like they were old friends. The way Taehyung's eyes sparkled, the way his smile lit up the room, drew everyone's attention. Jungkook felt a pang of uneasiness, his jaw clenched in annoyance. Taehyung, oblivious to Jungkook's growing unease, continued to chat with their colleagues, laughing and joking with ease. Jungkook's gaze snapped to Taehyung, his eyes flashing with a warning. Taehyung, still smiling, met Jungkook's gaze, his eyes softening into a warm, intimate gaze that made Jungkook's heart stutter. Let's go, Jungkook said abruptly, his voice low and slightly rough. Taehyung's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he smiled and nodded. Okay, I'm coming. Jungkook's eyes lingered on Taehyung for a moment before he turned and walked away, expecting Taehyung to follow. In the elevator, Taehyung leaned in close, his breath warm against Jungkook's ear. What's wrong, Rue? He whispered, his voice enveloping Jungkook's eyes locked onto Taehyung's, his mind racing with emotions he couldn't quite process. Suddenly, a voice in his head screamed, Just remember, you are mine. The man's heart skipped a beat, his breath catching in his throat. He was taken aback by the intensity of his own emotions. Taehyung's eyes fixated on Jungkook's face, oblivious to Jungkook's inner turmoil. You're not going to answer me, Rue? Jungkook's face felt hot, his eyes darting away from Taehyung's. "I'm just tired," he muttered, trying to compose himself. Taehyung's eyes never left Jungkook's as he inched closer, his movements fluid and deliberate. He turned Jungkook around, his hands wrapping around his waist, pulling him into a tight back hug. "This is where you come to rest when you're tired, Rue," Taehyung whispered, his breath warm against Jungkook's ear. His hand caressed the spot right above Jungkook's heart. Jungkook's resolve crumbled at the touch, his eyes fluttering closed. But he abruptly pulled away, his face burning with heat. "Taenie, stop," Jungkook whispered urgently, his voice low and husky. "We can't, not here." Okay. I'll behave, Rue." Taehyung's voice was laced with a hint of teasing, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of disappointment. He stepped back, his gaze drifting away from Jungkook's as he crossed his arms over his chest, a subtle barrier between them. Jungkook's eyes followed Taehyung's movements, his expression softening into an apologetic look, as if pleading for understanding. They stepped into the parking lot. Jungkook's car gleamed in the fading light. "Whoa, Rue's new baby is stunning," Taehyung exclaimed, running his hand over the sleek design. Jungkook chuckled, opening the door for Taehyung. "Hop in, Taenie. Where can I take you tonight?" Taehyung winked as he slid into the passenger seat, his voice low and smooth. "Thanks for the royal treatment, Rue. You're really spoiling me tonight." Jungkook's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled, starting the engine. "You hungry, Taenie?" "I'm starving, but not for food. At least, not yet." Jungkook's eyes locked onto Taehyung's, the air thickening with tension. "What are you in the mood for, then?" Taehyung's voice dropped to a whisper. "Something wild. Something exciting. Something that'll make my heart race." Jungkook's grip on the steering wheel tightened, his pulse quickening. "I think I can arrange that." "No worries, bro. Let me take the reins on Friday night's adventure. I know you're thinking of talking me to some fancy-schmancy dinner, but mate, I'd rather have a ripper of a time." Jungkook pouted, his eyes sparkling with amusement, as Taehyung chuckled and started searching on his phone. "Righto, here we go," Taehyung exclaimed, setting the location. "Let's hit this spot, Rue." Jungkook raised an eyebrow, glancing at the phone. "What's this place?" Taehyung grinned mischievously. "Reviews say it's the most happening spot in your city, mate. Gonna be a real blast." Jungkook sighed, shaking his head in resignation, but a small smile played on his lips as he took the route shown on Taehyung's phone. Jungkook pulled the car up to the entrance, his eyes scanning the crowded venue with hesitation. "This place, are we sure?" he asked, his brow furrowed. Taehyung grinned, already opening the door. "Absolutely sure, mate. Come on, let's get this party started." As they stepped out of the car, Taehyung skimmed through the crowd, Jungkook following closely behind. The air was electric, pulsating with music and laughter. Taehyung whistled low. "Not bad, eh? You've been missing out on some ripper spots, Rue." Jungkook's pout deepened as he glanced around, feeling uneasy amidst the throngs of people. His discomfort grew as people brushed against him, their bodies touching as they passed. He hated the invasion of personal space. Taehyung, meanwhile, was already chatting up a staff member, drawing admiring glances from the surrounding crowd. Taehyung, oblivious to Jungkook's unease, led the way, his eyes scanning the room. Suddenly, he turned around, his hand reaching out to grab Jungkook's wrist. Jungkook's heart skipped a beat as Taehyung's fingers wrapped around his, pulling him close. "Come on, Rue." "Taenie, leave my hand," Jungkook protested, trying to shake off the feeling of discomfort. Taehyung gave him a cheeky glance. "Big deal, mate." The staff member led them to a cozy spot, and Taehyung flashed a charming smile. "Thanks, love. You're a lifesaver." When the staff member walked away, Jungkook shot Taehyung a warning look. "Taenie, please stop calling everyone darling and love. It's not exactly done here." Taehyung raised an eyebrow, his expression playful. "Do I blend in here, babe? Besides, she arranged a table for us despite the place being so crowded. A little sweetness is the least I can offer." Jungkook's face flushed, and he hastily corrected himself. "I mean, just be careful, okay?" Taehyung chuckled unfazed. Relax, Rue. Enjoy the vibe. But Jungkook's attention was already caught by a group of girls eyeing them from across the room, their gazes fixed on Taehyung. Jungkook's fingers clenched into fists under the table. Taehyung, oblivious to the tension, scanned the menu. Rue, order something, will you? This menu's got me stumped. It's not in English. Just then, a girl approached their table, her eyes fixed on Taehyung. Hey, would you like to dance with me? Taehyung's face lit up. Me? Or him? He glanced at Jungkook, who shook his head vigorously. The girl smiled. You. Jungkook's face paled as Taehyung grinned, pushing back his chair. With pleasure, mate. Taehyung turned to Jungkook. He bent down, his lips inches from Jungkook's ear. You want to dance with me, babe? He whispered, his lips subtly caressing Jungkook's ear. Jungkook's eyes fluttered closed, his heart racing. He shook his head, his voice barely audible. And no. Taehyung chuckled, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Suit yourself, Rue. As Taehyung disappeared onto the dance floor, Jungkook watched, his eyes narrowing. The crowd swirled around Taehyung, drawn in by his infectious energy. Taehyung's eyes met Jungkook's across the room, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Minutes passed, and the food arrived. Jungkook served Taehyung a portion, his eyes still fixed on the dance floor. Taehyung returned, his long legs eating up the distance as he walked towards the table. His movements were fluid, elegant, and Jungkook couldn't help but watch, mesmerized. Taehyung's eyes locked onto Jungkook's, a hint of a smile still playing on his lips. As Taehyung took his seat opposite Jungkook, their eyes met, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. Taehyung broke the silence, his voice low. Rue, that was a blast. Not boring at all, like I thought. Jungkook kept his gaze down, focused on his food, his expression unreadable. His response was dry, a hint of jealousy creeping into his tone. Have your food now. Taehyung's gaze drifted to Jungkook's face, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he noticed the subtle puffiness. A low, husky chuckle rumbled in his throat, his eyes glinting with amusement. He let his foot slide forward, his toes brushing against Jungkook's leg under the table. The touch sent a spark of electricity through both of them. The food here is exquisite, Taehyung purred, his voice dripping with sensuality. Jungkook's eyes snapped to his face, a warning flashing in their depths. Tainy, behave, he growled, but Taehyung's leg continued its gentle exploration, trailing up Jungkook's thigh. Jungkook's face turned crimson, his eyes darting around the room as he struggled to maintain his composure. Taehyung's movements were fluid and deliberate as he pushed back his chair and slid into the seat beside Jungkook. Their arms brushed against each other, sending shivers down Jungkook's spine. This is cozier, Taehyung whispered, his breath dancing across Jungkook's ear. His hand wrapped around Jungkook's shoulder, slipping down to his waist, his fingers tracing the curve of Jungkook's hip. Jungkook's eyes widened, his voice tight with restraint. Taehyung, Nathaniel, not here. But Taehyung's response was a low, husky whisper. I don't care. We're leaving now, Jungkook said, his voice low and urgent. Taehyung raised an eyebrow, a mischievous glint in his eye. Come on, Rue. We just got here. What's the rush? Jungkook's gaze locked onto Taehyung's, his eyes burning with a mixture of frustration and desire. You've had enough fun for one night. Taehyung chuckled, the sound low and husky, as Jungkook waved his hand for the bill. The staff arrived promptly, and Jungkook paid quickly, his eyes never leaving Taehyung's face. Let's go home, Jungkook said, his voice firm, as he stood up, his movements swift and decisive. Taehyung followed closely behind, his eyes fixed on Jungkook's broad back, a playful pout on his lips. As they walked out of the venue, the cool night air enveloped them, but the tension between them was palpable, a living, breathing thing that pulsed with every step. As they walked towards the car, a girl's voice pierced the air. Hey, handsome. Taehyung and Jungkook turned in unison, their eyes locking onto the girl who had danced with Taehyung earlier. Jungkook's mouth fell agape as she sashayed towards them, a confident smile plastered on her face. She tucked a piece of paper into Taehyung's shirt pocket, her fingers brushing against his chest, her voice barely above a whisper. Call me. Taehyung's eyes sparkled with amusement, his lips curling into a sly smile. He gazed at her, his eyes following her as she walked away, her hips swaying seductively. Jungkook's piercing gaze, however, remained fixed on Taehyung, his eyes blazing with a mixture of surprise and irritation. Taehyung plucked the paper from his pocket, his fingers tracing the scribbled phone number. He looked up, his gaze meeting Jungkook's, and poked his tongue against his cheek before getting into the car. The door slammed shut behind him, and Jungkook's anger seemed to simmer just below the surface. He turned the engine on, his movements jerky with agitation. Taehyung turned to Jungkook, a mischievous glint in his eye. Rue, I must say, Korean girls are quite adventurous. I'm impressed. Jungkook threw a glare at Taehyung, his eyes flashing with annoyance, before slamming the accelerator. The car lurched forward, and Taehyung's laughter filled the air. Ow, Rue, easy. What's wrong with you, bloke? Taehyung chuckled, crumbling the piece of paper into a ball and depositing it in the side door pocket. Jungkook's gaze flicked towards the discarded paper, and for a moment, his expression softened. Some of the tension seemed to seep out of his shoulders, replaced by a sense of relief. As they drove, Jungkook's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched in a subtle display of displeasure. Taehyung, oblivious to the tension, flashed him a dazzling smile. Hey, Rue, won't you introduce me to your appa? Taehyung asked, his voice dripping with innocence. Jungkook's response was dry, his eyes fixed on the road. I'm not taking that risk, Tae. He wouldn't appreciate you. Taehyung's laughter was a low, husky sound. Oh, I see. You're protecting your appa from me? Jungkook's cheeks flushed, his eyes darting away from Taehyung's piercing gaze. Suddenly, Taehyung's expression changed, his face scrunching up in discomfort. Ow, Rue. I think that spicy food is getting its revenge. Jungkook's eyes snapped to Taehyung's face, concern etched on his features. What's wrong, Tae? As they pulled into the apartment complex, Taehyung's discomfort seemed to intensify. He tapped his feet impatiently, his eyes flashing with irritation. Jungkook chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Easy, Tae. Taehyung threw him a mocking glare before flinging open the door and sprinting towards the apartment. I'm gonna use this room, whoever's it is, he yelled, disappearing into the first room he found. Jungkook's eyes widened in alarm, his feet pounding the floor as he chased after Taehyung. He skidded to a stop outside the bathroom door, his voice low with concern. Tae, are you okay? Taehyung's response was a muffled groan. Absolutely not, my handsome. Jungkook's face twisted in sympathy. I ordered mild spicy for you, but I guess it was still too much. Taehyung's voice was a weak whisper. Just give me a minute. Jungkook's eyes softened, his voice gentle. Okay, freshen up. I'll be around. Jungkook headed to his room, his heart still racing from the events of the evening. The memory of Taehyung's playful words and the lingering heat of his gaze sent shivers down his spine. He couldn't help but replay the moments in his mind, feeling a heady mix of excitement and anticipation. Why does he have this effect on me? Jungkook wondered, his thoughts consumed by Taehyung's presence. How does he make me feel so alive, so vulnerable? Taehyung emerged from his room, his cologne wafting through the air, enticing Jungkook's senses. His shirt and loose shorts showcased his toned physique, his veiny legs flaunting their definition. Rue. He called out, his voice husky and inviting. Jungkook's response came from the kitchen. I'm here. His eyes remained fixed on the drink he was preparing, a traditional Korean remedy to soothe the stomach. Taehyung sauntered into the kitchen, his eyes scanning the space until they landed on Jungkook. What's brewing, Rue? He asked, his curiosity piqued. Jungkook handed Taehyung the glass, their fingers touching briefly. A remedy for your spice-addled stomach, he said, his voice low and soothing. Taehyung's smile was radiant as he took the glass. You're a lifesaver, Rue, he purred, his eyes locked onto Jungkook's. As Jungkook turned to clean the dishes, Taehyung's gaze drifted to his back, the curve of his buttocks visible beneath the loose-fitting pants. Rue, you're killing me? Taehyung whispered, his voice barely audible. Jungkook turned around, his eyes narrowing slightly. So, what brought you to my doorstep, Tae? He asked, his tone neutral. Taehyung's smile was enigmatic as he locked eyes with Jungkook. Wanna know? He asked, his voice dripping with sensuality. Just then, Jungkook's phone rang, shrill and insistent. It's Appa, Jungkook exclaimed, his eyes darting to Taehyung as if warning him to remain silent. As Jungkook answered the call, Taehyung inched closer, his face mere inches from Jungkook's. Jungkook's eyes flickered to Taehyung, his expression a mixture of surprise and irritation. Appa, I am, staying at my apartment this weekend. Jungkook stuttered, his eyes fixed on Taehyung's face. Taehyung smiled, his lips curling upward, before backing away and sauntering to the dining table. He sat down, sipping the drink, his eyes never leaving Jungkook's face. Jungkook slid the phone back into his pocket, his eyes locked onto Taehyung's. The tension between them was palpable, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Taehyung sat, his back against the chair, his legs man-spread, his bare skin on display. Jungkook stood, his back against the wall, his eyes fixed on Taehyung's face. Their gazes met, and for a moment, they were transported back to their first meeting. The same spark, the same tension, the same unspoken attraction. Finally, Taehyung spoke, his voice husky and inviting. Don't want to know why I came here,
As
Jungkook's words hung in the air, Taehyung's eyes widened, his pupils dilating with desire. I think I already know, Hyung, Jungkook said, his voice low and husky, the word, Hyung, rolling off his tongue like a sensual caress. Taehyung's breath caught, his chest heaving with anticipation. Say that again, Rue, he commanded, his voice taking on a sharp, dominant tone. Jungkook's lips curled into a sly smile, his eyes sparkling with amusement. No, he said, his voice sultry, his lips forming a perfect O shape. Taehyung's eyes flashed with desire, his manhood throbbing wildly in his shorts. He bit his lip, his voice taking on a husky, pleading tone. Please, baby, say it again. Jungkook's cheeks flushed, his eyes darting away, but Taehyung's siren-like gaze drew him back in. Please, Taehyung added, his voice a whispered promise. Jungkook's resolve crumbled, his giggle erupting into a nervous laugh. But as he caught Taehyung standing up, his eyes widened in alarm.
Danny, no.
Stay put, he warned, his voice laced with a hint of desperation. Taehyung's smile was a sensual, predatory curve. Won't I, he taunted, taking a step closer. Jungkook's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. He darted behind the couch, his voice a panicked whisper. Tainy?
Don't.
But Taehyung was relentless, his eyes fixed on Jungkook with an unnerving intensity. Oh, come on, he coaxed, his voice a husky whisper. Jungkook's resolve crumbled, his voice a desperate plea. Okay, Hyung, stay there. Taehyung slowed to a stop, his eyes locked on Jungkook's, a sly smile spreading across his face. Okay, I'll let you slip, he said, his voice dripping with teasing amusement. As Taehyung turned to walk away, Jungkook felt a pang of longing. He reached out, his hand wrapping around Taehyung's wrist. Taehyung turned around, his eyes meeting Jungkook's. Jungkook's eyes were wide and vulnerable, his gaze pleading. Tainy, Jungkook whispered, his voice barely audible. Taehyung's eyes seemed to burn with desire, his gaze drawing Jungkook in, refusing to let him go. He leaned in, his lips brushing against Jungkook's forehead, planting soft, gentle kisses. Jungkook's eyes fluttered closed, his lips parting in anticipation. But Taehyung ignored his lips, instead trailing kisses down his cheeks, his skin burning with pleasure. Taehyung's lips moved to Jungkook's side neck, pressing against the sensitive skin. Jungkook's eyes snapped shut, his body shuddering with pleasure. Slowly, Taehyung's lips moved to Jungkook's ear, kissing the lobe before licking the ear itself. His tongue glided through the ear piercing, sending shivers down Jungkook's spine. Taehyung wrapped his mouth around Jungkook's ear, his tongue moving in slow, sensual circles. Jungkook's hands clenched into fists, his breathing heavy, as he was consumed by the pleasure. Finally, Taehyung pulled away, the pop of his lips leaving Jungkook's ear ringing. He gazed at Jungkook, who froze for a moment, his eyes glazed over with pleasure. Like it, Ru? Taehyung asked, his voice husky with desire. Jungkook's voice was barely above a whisper. Tainy. He pressed his forehead against Taehyung's, their noses brushing against each other. Their eyes locked, Jungkook's hands cupping the sides of Taehyung's face, his fingertips carding through Taehyung's hair. Taehyung pulled Jungkook closer, gripping his waist, their crotches rubbing against each other. He captured Jungkook's lips in a sultry, sloppy kiss, licking his lower lip before pushing his tongue in. Jungkook's fingers curled around Taehyung's hair, grabbing him closer, as Taehyung's arms wrapped around Jungkook's torso, one around his back and one around his hip. The world around them melted away, leaving only the two of them, lost in the passion of the moment. Taehyung's lips never left Jungkook's as he gently guided him onto the bed. Jungkook's back hit the mattress, and Taehyung came down on top of him, their kiss deepening. Taehyung's palm cupped Jungkook's groin, his fingers subtly caressing the bulge. Jungkook's body skipped a beat, his eyes fluttering closed as he pulled away from the kiss. Their saliva stretched between their mouths, a glistening thread.